The best way to find out whether or not something like this is going on is to speak to the women in the team and believe them with what they're saying. They know. They have absolutely no reason to make this up if it's not happening in the team, right? You will likely not experience this yourself as a man, for example. But if the women in the team share this experience with you, believe them, address it, and change something. And check your emotional reaction to competent women.
So I think Simonetta and me, we met about 4 or 5 months ago, roundabout.
Sounds right.
And yeah, sounds right. And I think you contacted me on LinkedIn, or did I contact you on LinkedIn?
I think I contacted you on LinkedIn.
And I'm super grateful for that, because we got talking, and then Simonetta told me about a study she was doing at the time, but more about that later. So what I can say about Simonetta is, first of all, she has about 15 years, even more, product leadership experience, which is actually, I mean, considering that product management, at least in Europe, is not like such an old discipline, it's actually crazy that you have that amount of experience under your belt. She was at Zedo. I think that is something, or like a product a lot of people realize. If you ever went to a domain and said it has been parked at Zedo, then that is something that Simonetta was involved with. She was also at IO, and most recently, she is actually working as a product leadership coach. And one of the things that she's particularly interested in is gender equality in product. And that's essentially why we are here today. So thank you so much for joining us, Simonetta.
Hi, everybody. And it's a pleasure to be here and talk about a topic that I'm really passionate about. How can we create a bit more equality in the way we raise the ranks in product and have a career? And what role does equality and inclusions play in leadership in general?
Yeah. No, let's do it like that. Tell us a little bit about, because I was already teasering it. You did a study to actually find out how people get promoted in product and whether gender plays a role in that. Can you tell us a little bit about the setup of the study and what you did exactly, so that everybody is aware of the context that we are talking about today?
Sure. You already mentioned my 15 years in product, and when I first got started, it was a very male-dominated field to be in product. I was actually working in the US, so maybe the product world kind of started growing there first. But nevertheless, it was often lonely and it was often awkward, and I often got feedback or experienced things as a woman in tech that I noticed my male peers were not facing. And then as I was advancing in my career, having my own leadership roles, looking at how challenging it often was to staff teams in a diverse fashion, especially in tech. Oftentimes the applicant pool wasn't even equally stacked. I started realizing that there's a lot of other women in product who have experiences that were less than pleasant with regards to how women are treated in those kind of roles. So I just got curious, and I wanted to know, am I the exception here? Am I facing particularly strange situations, or is this a common thing? And so I decided to set up the study. I wanted to interview 50 people, 25 women and 25 men, on how they successfully got promoted in product, what was in the context of those promotions. And I started listening into the stories and into the patterns that I heard from people, and quickly found that no, I'm not alone in this. There are clearly things that work for both genders if you want to get promoted in product, and there are special things that affect women in adverse ways. And so my goal with the research is to shine a light on these differences, enable, empower women to know what they can do so they have more agency, can take more charge of their careers, and also allow the men in the field who care about a more equal playing ground around these themes to have awareness of what we're even facing here and how to set up teams that make more equal contributions more likely. So that's what I did. I did the interviews, and then based on that, I started a quantitative study. I'm still collecting responses to this. So if you're listening to this and you are keen to contribute to the research, I'm sure we can share in the show notes later a link to my type form to the survey, which is still running, collecting responses. I'm looking for more responses from men on this to have a representative result at the end. So yeah, I'm still in the middle of it, but there are things I can share based on the interviews and based on the survey responses to date.
That's super interesting. So first of all, we will definitely share that in the show notes, because it's a study that I'm like super interested in as well, to see the results and also to understand. And you said that, and I think that's an important bit. Like, it's not only about supporting the women, but also to supporting the men to understand that women might like need different things in their career, and also for us to realize that we might need to let's say not put our male standards on everything, but that people are essentially, or that gender actually matters in these things, right? And maybe one question, when you were talking about that you started realizing, like I guess it was like you said in your first job in product even, right? That you started realizing that you were struggling with things that your male colleagues weren't. Can you remember like a specific situation where you thought, like, maybe for the first time, or whether this kind of thought like cemented, where you thought like, well, that's nothing my male peers have to deal with?
I mean, to give you an example, I was a part of trade shows and in the domain name industry, right? Very male dominated industry. At industry events and conferences, you would be in the 1% to 2% female attendees to the show. And the kind of entertainment that was structured as networking that was perceived to be fun to attend for everyone in the industry would happen at places like the Playboy Mansion, or in Las Vegas, where you would take clients into a strip club, or where clients would literally ask me to take my glasses off, open my hair, shake out my hair to be the sexy librarian and stuff like this, where you clearly could see that they weren't like looking at me as a product professional, as somebody who has a contribution in the field, but as some sort of like a curiosity or weird young lady in the space that you could like interact with in ways that would be totally inappropriate if I was your daughter. And in a work context, it would take shape as, for example, me showing up in a meeting with a clear opinion, being as assertive as my male peers, but then being perceived as bitchy or controlling, versus if somebody of my male peers were to show up with their strategic ideas and contributions the same way, they would just be praised as a great leader or assertive or nice, strong voice in the room. And so when I started getting feedback around having to work on my tone, for example, or to smile more, or if the struggle is so bad that maybe I should just stay home and start having kids, like things like this would just not happen to my male peers when they showed up to work the same way I did. And so I realized that it really isn't the same game we're playing, but it took me a while, because initially I just thought, okay, I don't understand how my personal life and my friends perceive me to be a warm and pleasant and nice person. And then at work, I get this feedback to be too loud, too bossy, too bitchy, too this, too that, for just showing up, doing my work. And then talking to other women in the field, I started to realize, oh, this is a pattern that many women face in the workplace. We are being interrupted more often. We're being questioned more often. We're not being trusted that we have the same capabilities judging technical products, for example. So there's just a lot of things. Like they're all small things, and every time one of these situations happens to you, there's someone around that says, "Oh, it's not always like this. Don't think this is personal. Like just ignore blah blah blah." And but eventually you start realizing there are some patterns to this, and there are some things that really are just different in the way you're being perceived as a female in a leadership role in tech compared to the men around you. And so I think it's high time we speak about some of these things and change it.
And I can see that some of the people in the audience can relate to that. I have to be a little careful now. Like, I have to be a little careful in this event because I was about to say like a really bad word when you said said what you said. Has that changed over the years? Has it? I mean, is there? So first of all, I think there's two things I would be interested in. Is there a difference between the US and Europe? One, and maybe no. Okay, so that's a clear no. And did it change over the past 15 years?
I think there's more awareness on these topics, especially with the women in the field, because they have this problem, right? So I think there's more talk about it, more understanding what the issue even is. But these are issues that they're part of the way our society works, how our patriarchal system works that centers men as the norm, especially in business and leadership. And so there's a lot of unconscious bias going on in how we perceive competent women, how we perceive power and women, how we perceive leadership and women. And I think step one is awareness. Step two is like setting a different goal. Step three is starting to change habit, taking action to really show up and act in a different way. But we're up against unconscious habits. So it's not an easy thing to just shift. Just because you listen to this podcast doesn't necessarily mean you show up at work tomorrow with a different appreciation for the strong and competent women in your team. You might still perceive them to be too pushy or something. By the way, even the women, right? Not just the men, it's the women themselves looking at other strong, powerful women, feeling somehow unsettled by them not conforming to role expectations. So this it's changing. Yes, I think there's more awareness. I think what's also changing is the amount of women in leadership roles, and the amount of women in tech in general is rising. Those are good news. And with more representation, with more role models there, with different leadership styles showing up, with women taking their rightful seat at the table a little bit more, we are changing teams. We are shaping this in a new direction, but it's going slow. I mean, you look at all the studies, you look at how the gender wage gap is evolving, you look at still nowhere close to equality in terms of just numbers in whichever tier, role, and title. And the higher, the more senior you get, the fewer women in these roles, especially if the roles have power. So is it in a place where it should be? Absolutely not. Can we get there? Yes. But it takes a lot of effort. There's still a lot to do.
One of the things that just popped into my head, and I think we also talked about that when we first met, was that I would consider that I learned. So I had like the product leaders I worked with were primarily women. So I learned product primarily from women. So I hear what you say, but I think I can't really feel it.
And you
in
might
terms of
if you were one of the lucky people who had female product leaders that you reported into that were supporting you in your growth, right? But if you just look at the numbers,
sure,
of most people in product is not that, right? They're not used to having female leadership as much as just the statistical numbers. It's more likely that they report into men.
Yeah, and also that was the case. Like she was reporting, like the one person I'm thinking about, she was reporting to a man again, and then when push came to shove, she was overlooked for a promotion. So it's so I get the problem, but I just like personally I think I can't and Shannon makes a valid point. Yeah, I can't feel it. Also, I can't feel it. I mean, Shannon makes a very valid point here. How do you think you will feel it? You are a man, but that's a very, very valid argument. Yeah,
I want to build on this a little bit, because I don't think it's your fault that you can't feel it, right? Like, you are lucky enough that you're part of this privileged group that is not getting discriminated against based on your gender, right? As a man, you can still face discrimination in other dimensions, right? You might be a gay man, and then that might be where the discrimination comes in, or you might be a man from a working class background, and just by the way you speak and show up at work, you might be at a disadvantage, right? So it's not a one-dimensional thing about gender, right? But I think what's important about the point that we're talking about here is like whether you can feel the issue. I think this is part of the problem, right? The men in the product world face lots of challenges, but they don't face a structural challenge based on the fact that they're a man. And without feeling what the problem even is, it's very easy to not feel invested in shaping it or changing something either, because it doesn't even affect you. In fact, when I speak about this with men, I have numerous examples of simply not even being believed that this is my experience, because the lived experience of men in the space is simply different. So that's part of why this is so hard to be with and to change and shape as a topic, because the majority of people in the space, men, don't have the problem. The minority of people in the space know exactly what this is. And if you follow the comments in the chat along, you can clearly see that there's like another lady here who feels very passionate about the same topic and shares my experience, right? So the part of the challenge is to create spaces where we can have a dialogue where our voice is believed, even that the things that we're talking about are not made up, they're not crazy, they're not exceptions. They are patterns that many women in the space face. And so this is what makes it hard to change all of this, because the majority in the room doesn't even have the problem.
Yeah, and picking up what Shannon also just said, I emphasize with that situation, but obviously I can't feel your situation. When I said I can't feel the situation, what I meant is more that I can't really relate, or like that I don't get why, because what you described before, especially like with, oh yeah, can you put your hair down? Can you put it? I mean, that's an extreme example. I get that, right? But I also hear from that this happened quite a lot. And this is what I can't feel. So I don't get why you would behave like that as a human being. So that's I think where I'm getting at. And I get that I will never be the subject of that treatment, because at the end of the day, that's not your choice, right? And but still, yeah, when you just said that, like, yeah, what can I say?
Change tack a little bit, because we promised people to get some insights on things that work, right?
Absolutely.
So I think we did a great job at describing some of the baseline issues that are in our systems, in our organizations. But I'd like to speak a little bit about things that I have seen in interviews with people who successfully got promoted, especially women, also men, that are pieces you have under your control that you can shape yourself without changing the entire organization around you, that make it more likely that you are not being overlooked for that next promotion.
Great.
And so there are three big areas that I want to particularly call out. First of all, like, you will have to do a good job, right? That's true for women and men. If you are not meeting expectation, if you can't deliver, if you don't know what product even is, if you struggle to do basic things in product, you will not get promoted. Not a man, not a woman either, right? So all the people I have spoken with have, or most of them have actually mentioned how they got good feedback on being able to deliver stuff and being perceived as a person that creates outcomes. So that's kind of like the baseline for women and men. Exceptions will always exist, but that's like the baseline. Then on top of this, what's really important is to pay attention to relationships, to visibility, and to picking the right context. So what do I mean with this? Relationships. Somebody is going to decide on your promotion, right? Probably your manager, most likely if the organization is large enough, their manager too. So there's going to be people who will have to say yes to your promotion. And it's just human nature that you will likely or more likely say yes to somebody's desire for a promotion if you actually like this person. So investing and building a personal relationship with your manager and their manager is a really good idea, because when your manager suggests you for promotion and the person they are aligning this with, their manager already knows you, already likes you, it's going to be much easier for them to get that yes to promote you. So don't be shy to invest time in internal networking in your organization to really build that personal human connection with your manager and their leader. That's the first thing.
Any tips how to do that? So if someone thinking like, oh, networking, that's such an abstract thing for me. So
I mean, your manager, hopefully you have a one-on-one with them. Just show up as a human, like ask them also how they're doing. What is it that they're struggling with? How you can be of support to their goals. And ask them a personal question. Like, you see them come into that one-on-one, maybe super stressed, you realize something's going on, like dare to have a personal relationship with this person, whoever they are, right? They will have a family, they will have other things going on in their life, they will have hobbies, whatever. You don't have to share like everything and like be the perfect partner to them, but just like as a human, from one human to another, you can have a positive relationship, right? Where you just do stuff that is nice, like have a lunch together, have something that's like more than just a work relationship, in appropriate ways, of course, but you know, like just treat them as a human. That would be my number one. If it's not that hard to you have lots and plenty of occasions to interact with them and be in this relationship building game with them. Asking them for their help is a great way to build relationship. People love supporting others. It's actually a factor that builds happiness in a person. If you can help somebody, most people really like this. So asking for help is a great way to build relationship. There's so many ways that to build and just hear what's going on. Like, just, hey, I know you went to this management offsite. Can you tell me a little bit about what's going on? Do you have any concerns? Is there some way I can support you? Can you illustrate the new direction of the company for me a little bit more? I still don't understand this piece of it. What are your thoughts on it? What am I missing? There's so many ways to build that relationship. But just be intentional about it is my tip. Don't leave it up to chance that the people that might have to decide on your promotion, and that could be an entire committee of people, right, don't even know who you are. Like, be visible to them. And that's kind of like the segue into the second tip, visibility, right? They have to know who you are. and you want to be visible as a person that makes a strategic contribution. So one of the biggest blind spots I see having people when they go from individual contributor into a leadership role in product is to not be commercial enough, to not understand the bigger picture company strategy, to not be an eye-level conversation partner with the executive team around strategic direction and the business model of your organization, right? So, and those are great topics to again build relationship with, right? You can go and have a conversation about that strategy you're pursuing, that the weaknesses or strength of your business model and how to better create a competitive advantage. All these things are great ways to be visible to the leadership, and whatever you can do to contribute to that means that they will succeed and you succeed with them. So be very strategic in how you show up in your visibility. Be a part of contributing into strategic projects. If there's a call for contribution for something that has to do with a new strategy, raise your hand and say, I'm interested in this. And then contribute, right? So that's a great way to be seen and then be trusted to take on more, because if you deliver on something like this, that's like a rare thing. As a leader, you want to have those people in your team that contribute into those kind of initiatives, because that sets the whole organization up for success in an aligned fashion. And then finally, on picking the right context, this is, I think, important for women to understand. Be careful to join organizations where there are no other women in leadership roles. I mean, it's a clear telling sign the culture of this organization has so far not supported any women in a leadership role. There are other organizations that have more visibility, more presence of women in leadership already. That's like culture in action, right? It's not guessing, do they value equality and then they don't promote women? No, if they actually value equality, they will have some women in leadership roles. It's a very simple thing you can look for. And if you can spot an organization that has at least 30% women in their stack and in leadership roles, there's a tipping point where culture shifts to a lot more equality, a lot more inclusiveness. So those are things that are easy to pick out. Another thing that you can pay attention to as a woman trying to rise the ranks in product is, are there clear role expectations? So in the context of your organization, what is it that makes that is the descriptors of, here is an IC product person, here's a leadership role in product, here's the CPO role in product, and anything in between? Are there transparent criteria for what warrants a promotion? That doesn't guarantee fair treatment, but at least there is something in the organization that makes it possible to have a conversation. Do I meet this list of criteria or not? Because what a lot of women face, and that's also been part of the findings of my research, is they go to their boss and they say, I'm interested in making my career in product. Person says, yes, okay, you're not ready. Gives them a list of homework to do of what they have to deliver before they can be considered for this promotion. The lady goes off, does diligently deliver on all of her homework assignments, comes back into the next conversation, says, look, I've done all these things. I'd like to have this promotion. And then the yardstick moves. And out of a sudden, there's new criteria that previously have not been talked about. And so if there is some sort of structure in the organization around like what a transparent set of criteria for different levels in product is, that helps. Those are like two clear things you can just like ask for and watch for, even in your interviews and before you join the organization, because you don't want to find yourself in a place where culture just inadvertently gives you no chance. So those are things that are very practical, hands-on things that I think women and men can do and watch for. I mean, by the way, like having criteria for how you rise the ranks is equally helpful for men. Obviously, having visibility is equally helpful for men. Having good relationships with the decision maker is also a requirement for men. So it's not that this is like all that different, but the way, if you don't know these things and you don't do them as a woman, that you just by accident get promoted and you find yourself in this new role and you didn't even ask for it, that's a story I hear from men. It's not a story I hear from women. So and a good number of the men I interviewed said, oh, I was promoted into this leadership role. I didn't ask for it. I was just offered the opportunity. I was in the right time and place in this organization and I just got the job. I'm sure there are some women where this is true as well, but it's not as often as frequently mentioned as from men.
All right, I want to go into this a bit. I mean, whether your research shows that or not, I'm not sure, but why do you think that is?
I think it has to do with a bias that is not just a product bias, but it's a known bias in how we promote women and how we even apply for roles, right? It's more likely that you get promoted based on potential if you're male.
Okay.
And less likely that the potential card is your ticket for women. And on top of it, it's more likely for men to raise their hand and say, I'd like to have this job when they have like 60%-ish of the requirements that are on paper asked for. Women think they have to have 100% of them before they even apply. So there is something in women that thinks that we have to 100% know and do everything perfectly before we even qualify. So sometimes we don't even say I'm interested when we don't fully meet this criteria list. Ourselves being blind to the fact that our colleague next door also only has 60% of the requirements, but has no problem saying I'm interested, right? So for my tip for the ladies is just be as bold as the men. Ask for it, even if you don't fully incorporate all the things that it would take to be in this new role. So that's part of it. And I think another part of it is that there's an assumption in the system oftentimes, or there are assumptions about women in the system. For example, if we're at an age where we might want a family, the assumption is that we will deprioritize our career and want to take care of kids and stay home, versus our male peers, same age, also about to start a family. Nobody thinks that they will not be interested in advancing in their career anymore. So there's lots of little things going on that all kind of compile and compound each other and lead to less trust that women have the same capability as their male peer to shine in a new role when we're not 100% there yet, for example.
You mentioned, you mentioned two things, right? So that men are actually given the benefit of the doubt when it comes to potential, right? And the second, this is something obviously that you on the receiving end can't really do anything about. But the other thing you meant, right, maybe you have a different opinion in that regard. But the other thing being that you can, that basically women tend to just raise their hand to get to a certain position if they check basically 100% of the boxes, where you said, hey, listen, probably the guy next to you only checks 60% of the boxes as well, go for it. But for the first one, like when you talked about the potential, what I would be interested in is, does that change if your boss is female? So does that have an effect at all?
It's a really good question. I don't actually know if anyone ever looked into this, whether female bosses would more likely promote other women on potential. There's reason for me to doubt that, because in other ways where bias plays a role, women tend to show up just as biased as their male peers unless they are aware of the thing and they're consciously acting against this, right? And this is like when we speak about this this gap of how likely it is to promote based on potential men versus women, right? It doesn't even matter if the decision maker is a man or a woman. When they are starting to be aware of this, they can start addressing it, right? They can start actively looking for a suggestion list for promotions that is representative and diverse, and that takes into account, oh, am I thinking about the women who currently have only 70% of these things, who may not have raised their hand proactively, who might show just as much potential as the guy who already said, I'm interested? Can I go have a conversation with her and encourage her to take that next step? That's regardless of female or male boss, something that we all can do, right? If the moment we know that this dynamic is at play, we can assume that it's also a play in our organization, right? And that it merits the attempt to speak to the women, to encourage them to take steps to say I'm interested, right? And by the way, this is another tip. Maybe like if you don't even make known to your boss that you are interested in a promotion in the foreseeable future, right? It's very easy for them to assume that you're not interested. So just make yourself known, right? From the get-go, from when you join their team. Hey, I am looking to grow. I'm looking to develop my career. My next idea for a step I want to be is going to be this. How can we work together to support me getting there? And finding yourself support around this is something any woman and man can do, right? There's also statistics around how it's so much more likely that you get promoted if you have a mentor or a coach. It's so easy to do, right? Like find a mentor, find a coach, invest into your career, right? Like, yes, that coaching package may set you back, I don't know, like somewhere around 2K, right? But if you look at your next pay rise and how much more money you're going to be making, it's a no-brainer. Like why aren't more women kind of like smartly investing in their growth this way? I don't know, but this is something we all have access to, we all can do. And by the way, when I speak to the product leaders who have been promoted repeatedly about what it is that they wish they had known or done earlier on in their career, the amount of times the topic of I had so many blind spots, I would have needed a coach much sooner, that would have helped me advance much faster. The amount of time that's being brought up is just ridiculous. But those are the people who've already made it. So if you're at the start of this, you can listen to what these successful people are sharing, what they would have needed. Talk to them, right? Talk to the people also who have the role that you would want to have, about what it's like, what they are learning now that maybe you can start learning sooner. And all of this might accelerate your career. Again, women and men, right? This applies to both genders.
This is probably one of the advices I give most often. Talk to the people who are already there.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Is there, while we are talking about biases, because that is something I would be like super interested in. So to all the product leaders, that male or female, who are listening, what are the top 3 biases that you need to look out for when you think about who to promote in your team? Because you said like the one thing being, okay, be aware that a woman will most likely only apply for that promotion if she checks 100% of the boxes. But if you feel like she is qualified to do the job, then talk to her and encourage her. Is there like any other social biases or biases of whatever sort that come into play here that you would say, please watch out for those?
Yeah, there's actually something in the way social interactions work in the team. And the cool thing is there are even like tools now to better track and spot this, and that has to do with what is the percentage of speech time in meetings, male versus females in the team? How often do men interrupt other women? Or the other way around, right? Like, those are signs for not being allowed to contribute with the same voice, right? And that's something that a lot of women face, that we get interrupted a lot, that our proposals aren't listened to when we frame them, unless someone else backs us up with the same idea. We say something, and then the guy next to us says the same thing 10 minutes later, and everyone says, oh, great idea, as if you had never spoken, right? So those are things to be aware of that affect the women in the team. And the best way to find out whether or not something like this is going on is to speak to the women in the team and believe them with what they're saying. They know. They have absolutely no reason to make this up if it's not happening in the team, right? You will likely not experience this yourself as a man, for example. But if the women in the team share this experience with you, believe them, address it, and change something. And check your emotional reaction to competent women. There's a big research study that has come out of MIT a while ago on the competence likability dilemma. Competent women are liked less. They show up at work with the exact same contributions as their male peers, and the emotional reaction to this woman is, oh, she's bitchy, she's bossy, she's too loud, she's too assertive, she's too this, too that, whatever. Check your own reactions. Like, in a quiet moment, ask yourself, how does it trigger you when one of the strong female voices in your team shows up and contributes? Would you feel equally triggered if one of the men in the team said or did the same thing? I know it's hard to tell because it's a situation that you just experienced with a woman in a team, and you didn't experience that same thing in the exact same way with the men in your team. But I mean, I honestly had to kind of look in the mirror hard on this particular one, realizing that I didn't like my my female COO in my previous organization for some of those same reasons, because I didn't like the way she showed up powerful. And I'm pretty sure if she had been a man doing the exact same things, my emotional reaction would have been slightly different. So it's another thing to be aware of, and to just kind of like check yourself against, and then say, okay, I might not like this as much, but she deserves a shot anyway, because the outcomes she creates are great. The ideas she contributes are the right ones. The teams she builds perform well. She deserves that shot. And it's normal that the competent woman in my team is liked less than the competent men in my team, from women and men in the team and stakeholders and executives, everyone around us.
Got it. Lot of food for thought. So if I seem absent like now a bit, it's just like I'm currently also reflecting on these things, and try to figure out if there were like situations in the past where that also happened to me. Because I mean, at the end of the day, there's so many social biases, not only around this topic, that you are not super intentional about, right? And it's I was just like reflecting on a couple of situations where I thought like, oh yeah, that might have been the case in that situation for me as well. And so I kind of lost track here a bit. So I think one think one thing that I wanted to ask before I can't believe it, we are already 45 minutes in. It's when you look at I know that the quantitative survey is not done yet, but when you look at the 50 people that you interviewed, when you look at I don't know which level we should look at, or like maybe first promotion or first leadership position, what is the gap in years between men and women when you look at this?
This is like honestly one of those things that I don't have great data on just yet.
Okay.
And it is a question I actually put to the LinkedIn team because they have this data. And I'm talking to somebody in their DEI team who publishes reports on gender equality across the whole population of all kinds of jobs in LinkedIn. So I hope that they will share some data with me on this, because my hypothesis is that from the time you start in product to your first promotion, this time is longer for women than for men. But my sample is too small, so I don't want to just blanket make the statement right now, and then turns out that's actually not even the case, right? So, but that's one of the questions I'm looking into, and the quantitative survey does ask this question, right? So, but it doesn't have enough responses just yet for me to comfortably say, here is my conclusion. This is the exact number of years gap.
Got it.
But there must be gaps, both in terms of like how many get promoted into that next level, because there's more equality on the number of people in individual contributor roles, and then the more senior it gets, there's fewer and fewer women. So it would just be logical that that's also there.
Yeah. All right. Let's do the following. I have a couple of more questions, but we also have only like 13 minutes left. So I would also love to open it up to the audience. So if you have any questions for Simonetta, then please make sure to put them in the chat. We can, as you already saw during the event, put them on stage. And while we are waiting for that, I would actually love to promote something that we do every autumn, which is the Just Product Conference in Munich. And even if you're not in Munich, you can join the live stream for free. We have a couple of really great speakers already lined up, including David Pereira, who has just released his first-time book, and Shivi Shi from LinkedIn. There's also one person that is not on the website yet. That is Bob Muesta. He will be coming to Munich in October. And if you would love to join, then definitely make sure to get your ticket soon. Or if you would love to join a workshop with David, that's also a possibility. Maybe a small side note, because it fits very well into that topic. One of the things that is super important for us, also in terms of speaker lineup, that we get a 50-50 parity on men and women. This is something that we are really trying to do very hard each year. Hopefully this time with more women than men, because last year I think we had about 50-50, but we had one more men than women. So it's about time to kind of equalize that out next year, or like this year. And while we're on it, how can people reach you, Simonetta, if they want to get in touch because of the survey? I mean, we will share that as well. Or if they want to get in touch for coaching with you, or to have a chat further about the topic.
I mean, very simple, right here on LinkedIn. You can find me with my name, Simonetta Batteiger. You can find my website under inclusiveleaders.de. And any of these ways you can reach me and just connect and talk to me. There's a link to set up a call with me with a Calendly embedded in my LinkedIn profile. So it's very easy to get in touch with me if you're interested.
Perfect. All right. We have a question from Shannon. What are the green flags of a good culture you can detect in interviews other than the percentage of leadership?
Yeah, I mean that's a very obvious thing to look for, and I wouldn't actually even like go all the way to the interview to try and look at this. I personally would look at the company's Teams page on their website before even submitting my application. And by the way, a lot of women do this. So for those organizations out there who struggle to attract women, this might be why you don't get applications, because women screen for this. Other green flags of good culture that we can detect in interviews are a commitment to training and development. So to just ask, hey, do you have a development budget for people in your organization, right? If they have that, that's a good sign. You can ask for, hey, is there any kind of specific support for me as a woman in my aspiration to become a leader in your organization, and listen to their response. Like, it doesn't mean that if they don't have a great response to that question that you should say no to the job, but are they even open to this topic? Or if you say this, they kind of cringe and they're like, oh, and make a face, and you can already tell it makes them uncomfortable to even speak about this. Versus someone's like, oh, you know what? I think we should be doing more in this regard, and then they're at least open to this, right? They're aware enough that there is a topic there and that there are things that you can look for. There might be things like some companies are starting to offer fertility benefits. Like, there's so many couples who struggle to have children, right? So if this is something that's important to you and you know that this is part of your life, could be something that would be a green flag for me, because that means organization offering something like this as a benefit knows about there are specific supports that people need in their lives, that women need, that are just offered as a by default for their entire staff, right? So those are things that I would consider to be green flags. And I see Shannon put in the chat, like, companies lie about these things, but the composition of the leadership team on the website is hard to lie about, right? There's either women's faces on the website, women's names there, or not, right? They can say all they want in the interview, but you can see on the website, are there women represented in senior roles in that organization, yes or no? You can literally ask about the composition of your team. Are you going to be the only female in that team or not, right? You can know that. You can know who your hiring manager is. Is this a woman or a man? Who is their manager? Is this a woman or a man? They're things that they're hard to lie about, right? They're just facts. So.
Got it. Since you are mentioning fertility, or like at least support with fertility treatments, etc., I think we have to talk about one thing that we also talked before we jumped into the event, and that we haven't really touched on yet. But I mean, obviously, there are biological differences between men and women. And which of these should you take into account also as a product leader, where we kind of come into that area? Yes, we should shoot for more equality, but still women have to be treated a little different in the workplace than men, or the other way around as well.
I would kind of like bucket this under the big topic of supportive leadership, right? We know as leaders, people have different motivations. Every single one of our team members needs support a different way, sometimes about a different topic that they want to learn about and develop with, but also just as a human being, right? We have different needs in terms of flexibility. For example, we need time to pick up a kid from kindergarten, could be the man or the woman in the team, right? We just need support around specific topics. And there are topics that are likely only happening in the woman's life that will not likely happen in a man's life, right? So fertility treatments, if you go through IVF treatments, the hormonal ups and downs, the depression episodes, the kind of things that go with this are not likely going to be experienced by men in the team, right? We have a cycle as women. So for 10% of women, they deal with endometriosis, which is a very painful thing to have while you have your period. in those days, you need a little bit of slack. That's not a problem the men in the team will ever have, right? They just don't have a period. They don't have a cycle. They don't go through these swings of ups and downs in their hormones. They don't get pregnant, right? So, and they don't go through menopause or perimenopause times in a woman's life where literally our brain rewires and resyncs with our hormones in our bodies, leading to things like hot flushes or brain fog. And to just know that these things are happening in a woman's life, and the women in your team are great contributors despite all of these things, but they might need support that looks a little bit different than the support of their male peer who may have other needs, right? It's just a topic that oftentimes isn't even talked about. Or we have a miscarriage, right? Like 1 in 3 pregnancies ends in a miscarriage. You don't talk about this at work, but you're obviously sad, right? And it affects your body. It affects the way you are able to show up at work. So to just open the floor to the idea that specific kinds of support might be needed by the women in your team that the men in your team won't need is something that I think we need to speak about more and take action on more.
Thank you for sharing. I mean, I can only speak for myself, but for me, this was a super enlightening session. And before we hopped live, we were already starting to talk about like all these different aspects of your study. And I was saying like, let's not talk too much about it because otherwise I can't be curious anymore. And to be honest, like during our talk, my mind drifted a lot. So because you said, like when we talked about biases, my mind drifted a lot. And I was thinking, all right, do I do this as well? Do I do this as well? Can I think of a situation where I did this as well? And it's, I think, so personally, I think, I took that away from this session today. And I think if people can take that away today, that was time well spent. And thank you so much for giving us an hour of your most valuable resource, your time, essentially. And before we conclude this, the last words always belong to the guest. So is there anything in conclusion or a call to action for everybody who is listening?
Yeah, in conclusion, I just want to encourage us all to have this dream of a world where we don't even have to have this conversation because women's issues are taken serious. We have equal numbers, equal representation, equal voice, equal access to power, equal access to budgets and promotions and all the cool stuff that helps us create impact in the world. And if this hour spent of my life contributes towards this more equal world in the future, then this is time well spent for me. It's my passion project. I care about creating this change, and I look at this as a small puzzle piece in that game.
Thank you so much. And to everybody out listening, make sure once you receive that through the show notes to click on the survey of Simonetta. Probably you have to scroll down depending on where you are watching this. Click this and fill in the answers. As far as I heard, especially if you're a man, because like this one time we are lacking the voice of the men. That's very interesting, to be honest. Or maybe not, because yeah, as you said, and also as we saw in the chat today, obviously as men, we can't feel it. We can only empathize. But this makes the issue even harder. So if you're a man, scroll down, go to the survey and fill it out. It will help everybody in product in the long run. Thank you so much again, Simonetta, and to everybody out there. Have a great, hopefully sunny evening wherever you are. With that, we are out.
Bye.